welcome to Combat Vet Vision. This is a place where combat veterans, myself, other sponsors, supporters, volunteers get to tell their stories, come in here and actually, this is to help veterans either navigate their life or whatever it might be. Our sponsor, supporters, and volunteers be able to come in and tell their stories and help navigate some systems, but really just to get a really good story across and do some stuff. I am here today with my good buddy and longtime friend, Randy Bahork, fellow chief, retired, doing some really incredible stuff in his life, and another Lima Company corpsman that we've been following with Lima Company, and we're going to get all four of those guys together in the near future. Randy, thanks a lot for being here, brother. Great to have you again.
Absolutely.
This is your second time on my podcast. Thanks for being here physically and in the flesh. So.
Absolutely, man. It's a good feeling, like always, man. Like I always tell you, it's always good to catch up with brothers. We have distance from a lot of us, different states, but if I'm in the same state, man, I'm gonna make the effort to definitely run into you and butt heads a little bit. And, the brotherly love, man. Why not?
Exactly. Hey, and the last time we spoke, we had a lot of really good discussion too. But I'd love for you to tell your story again a little bit, talk about, your time with Lima Company, and then get into, and go back in time and why did you join the military? And we go way back too and talk about our experience when we met and what that meant and how that went.
All right. So for me, I'll have to say my time started back in 99, kind of at crossroads, trying to figure out what to do next with life. I was an overachiever, graduated high school early, started college early, tried to pursue a degree and just wasn't working out. So I figured, join the military, grab some money for school and pay that out. But, when I joined, this was pre 9/11. So, TSA didn't exist. You could still carry a 2-liter Coke through the airport security. Nobody would question it, carry your whole suitcase practically through the checkpoints and nobody would, bat an eye to it. So, I decided to join the Navy, and honestly, joining a gunnery sergeant is who told me about being a Navy corpsman. So, went to the recruiting office, and, he popped in. Back then was a VHS, right? Marine comes out of the water, all cammyed up, flies off in the helicopter. And I'm like, hell yeah, man, sign me up. And I was like, where's the medical portion of it? He's like, oh, man, we ain't got no medical. I'm like, shoot, man, well, I guess I'm going to go to the Army. He goes, whoa. He goes, back in my day in the infantry, there was this guy. We called him Doc, and he was a Navy corpsman, and he did everything we did, practically. Slept with us in the field, ran the ranges, shot, you name it, he did it. And then when we got hurt, he took care of us. I'm like, cool, man, sign me up, right? So walked into the Navy recruiter office, said I want to be a Navy corpsman, started my pipeline, and the first time I ran into you was back in July of 2000. So I just completed boot camp and corps school, checked in at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, the old hospital way back out there by what mountain lions would be hanging out sometimes when we'd be out those runs.
That's right. You can see some paw prints or even a quick little flash of the lion.
Yeah.
Right.
And checked in. At the time, he was HM2 Siebert, and I was just a little HA, a little E1 or E2 checking in. And he would run us, Siebert would run us, him and Andino, remember HM2 Andino. Man, both these guys would just run us into the dirt through the hills. But, that was like the start of somebody taking charge of us and like prepping us, right? Because I was going to field medical, at the time was field medical service school, right? Now it's called field medical training battalion. And I didn't know what I was getting into, man. I was going to hang out with a bunch of Marines. I was like, cool. And from when I left home to that point in my life, I had already gone through some stuff. I had torn my ACL playing soccer, or partially torn it, went through a specialist, and they're like, hey, man, as long as you run straight, you're good. I'm like, all right, cool. I want to go to field med. They're like, nah, you ain't got to run straight there. I'm like, yeah, but I still want to go hang out with Marines. And so I chose that path and, made it through field med and checked into Lima Company 3-5, their battalion, 5th Marines out in 5th Marine Regiment. And, that's probably where I can say I started my journey as a young sailor, right? So checked in, You know, met some of the guys over at Lima. I think the first guy I ever met was Otis Miller. That was first platoon. And I met him when I was still at Phil Med. Like, he would come out and like check out the prospects that were coming in, right? And so he's like, yeah, bro, you want to go to 3-5? I'm like, bet. And him and I became like, that's like my brother from another mother. And a couple of months later, Hector Reyes checked in and Derek Hudnall checked in. It's like, we're like the four corners, right? So we're like at opposite ends, and slowly but surely, we became the Lima Docs, man. Like, we're pretty known across the battalion. Like, you know, Reyes and I, and even Hudnall, we're all Marine rank sailors. And so those are things that are not very common in the corpsman world, right? Like, it's only a few back then, you know, we had things called like super squad and whatnot. And there was always one of us attached to those super squads where you'd run like a gauntlet of like exercises all over 5th Marines, up the heel pad, down the Widowmaker. And then there was another sailor back then, HMT Spencer at the time. This guy,
Gummy Bear Hope. Yeah, because he worked at a gummy bear factory.
Yep.
Yeah, this guy has one of the oldest corpsmen I knew.
Yeah. This guy just was like one of the longest running. He didn't even look like a runner, but man, this guy would run us the Widowmaker up the helipad, back up First Orange Hill, and then guess what? Get back to the BS and do your work, man. And yeah, it was like you know, we're like, back then we were a bunch of youngsters, you know, we were just trying to figure out life. And so I think for a lot of us then, you know, we all kind of clicked very well, and we started our foundation of that brotherhood, right? And so we did a deployment to Okinawa. We were part of the 31st MU. And, you know, we went out, saw the world on a different aspect of being like a combat deployment. You know, we actually got imparted overseas. We were in Hong Kong with the Philippines, Korea, you know, and these were like life lessons for us, because now, I mean, I've never traveled. I never traveled before I even joined the Navy. And here I am, like, seeing the world, right? And so we get back from this deployment, you know, we kind of...
Do you remember that deployment? We almost got steered off because there was something that kicked off in, I want to say it was Pakistan and something else.
Afghanistan. We were going to support.
We're like, hey, there might be something we have to... If we leave out of this port and we steer left, we're going to go this way. If we steer right, we're going back home. We could have gotten steered right off into a combat scenario or a neo op or something.
So at the time, the 31st MU, usually when they're out and operating, they're the most furthest out that can pretty much be that react force, the QRF, for whatever op is going on. And so yeah, they had told us that. So we're on a constant Sparrowhawk mission, right? Like, you just kind of stand by to wait and find out what's going to happen. So a lot of, like, at the time I was a helo company, and yeah, we slept on the flight deck plenty of nights, just waiting to leave, or on the down in the well deck or in the chute, just waiting to go. But yeah, we were on standby that year on that deployment. Then we got back, and then, you know, things were kind of quieted down, and then next thing you know, it was like, oh, we're going to war. And we're like, wait, where are we going? And sure enough, it's like, I remember I was on leave and I got recalled back. I was like, I got to spend Christmas at home, and then literally like day after Christmas, I flew back to Camp Pendleton. And I remember it was like a anthrax and smallpox stand down, like everybody's getting shot up. And then we pretty much, the parties in January, we all got to Kuwait. We hung out in Kuwait till about maybe mid-March. And I want to say that's probably where a lot of us were tested, tried and true, right?
That's right.
Like, we got out there, and man, like I laugh at some of the stuff that we went through, because like these were things that, you know, we would read in a book
or see in a movie.
Like
Legit,
literally, right? Like that sandstorm that happened March 25th or the 26th. Like,
how about just like, we were like going to have our last meal, and it was going to be like the steak dinner.
Yeah.
They were like cooking all these steaks, and we left like literally like 5 hours before that.
Yeah.
And they told us about these steaks they were going to serve us.
Never got steak. Got a different
and it was straight up a safari across the desert. Like, everybody's just moving across the desert to the line of departure at an immediate rate.
which was unique because, like, you know, a force online sweeping through a country is how I can best describe what 2003 was. Like, literally, you had 1st Marines, 5th Marines, 7th Marines, and that's just the Marine units. Then you have like all these Army units, but his little fuel trucks and
Random vehicles that you've never seen. Every vehicle that was out there was a military vehicle. It looked like a freeway that you would see in America, but every vehicle on that freeway was nothing but military. So very strange view for sure. And a lightning storm in the distance when we took out the Ant Hill.
Yeah,
that looked like a lightning storm, but was actually the tomahawks hitting that hill and just taking out their ability to communicate.
Yeah, so it was an eye opener. Like I'd have to say that, like, growing up, I first saw myself a certain way, and in Iraq, I discovered who I truly was meant to be. And so after that deployment, came back and I signed up for it again. I'm like, yo, I love this shit. It's great. Like, this is where I strive at. And so trauma was my thing for the longest. Like, gunshots, amputations, sucking chest wounds, like, easy day, man. Like, I roll with the best of them. And so I went back out in 04. I was out there for Fallujah. I went out with 1st Marines. I was a replacement. I attached to 3-5 for like 2 days while they were out pushing around through the Jolan district. I ran into Chris Johnson, who lived out at the train station, a couple of other guys at the apartment complex. And then I came back in 05. And, you know, by this point, I was a 3rd class. I was a petty officer, 3rd class, E4, you know, making rank. And then I was meritoriously promoted to E5 when I came back from that deployment. And, you know, I would bitch and complain about sailors coming out of field med. I'm like, man, these guys ain't tough. Like, who the hell's teaching these dudes, right? And one of my old mentor, Terry Green, was like, Bo, if you want to make a difference, then why don't you go be a field med instructor? And I'm like, you know what? Fuck yeah, I'll go be a field med instructor. And yeah, I did 3 years at field med. And, you know, there's a lot of guys out there that remember me. I mean, I can't remember everybody. I mean, shoot, I was pushing 300 students per class, but they all, to this day, there is still somebody out there that'll say, like, oh yeah, HM2 Bahork is, yeah, don't cross that dude the wrong way, man, because he's gonna check you. And, you know, honestly, like, I was a dude that grew up around the infantry, and, you know, the standard expectations that I was taught in that mindset are things that, those are life lessons, right? And so they help you define how you function and how you do your work, you know? And so along the way, again, like, starting from when I met Siebert, like, he gave me a foundation of standards and expectations. And then I went somewhere else and I met another mentor, and now a senior guy, right? He gave me standards. And so here I am, like, just collecting. So I think as I went along life, right, as a young sailor, when I was in Corps school, we had this saying, we're like, jack of all trades, master at none, right?
And trauma gods. And that, you know, with a lot of humbleness in between.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I tell people, it's like, yeah, man, I was a fucking doctor out on the battlefield. Like, what do you mean? Like you work in the hospital? Like, no, man, we're working in the field. Like, you have a backpack. And back then, like, this is like OIF time era, like 2003. Like, our equipment was so old because really the Marine Corps hadn't been tested like this in 30 years. So a lot of us ran with stuff that was still used in the Vietnam era, right? And, you know, we had to do a lot of hard lessons learned and use that to rebuild our medicine, right? So when I got to Phil Med, we revamped it, right? I'm like, there's no way we could be teaching kids to go to war and do medicine, practice medicine that's 30 years old, you know? So when we went, we were considered non-combatant. Like, you got Doc out there running around with a 9-0. Like, we might as well throw rocks at these dudes, you know? So we made it to where corpsmen would train within force. Corpsmen would go on the range and shoot. Corpsmen would qualify because in the essence of it, like, yeah, our job is designed to take care of the wounded. But, you know, one of the best things that we always practiced out there and preached was bullets down range is the best medicine on the battlefield.
Yeah, best medicine on the battlefield is fire superiority. there's another thing you just kind of reminded me of, a saying that I use that I haven't used in a long time. I have everything you need, nothing you want. as a corpsman, I used to say that to the Marines all the time. Hey man, I got everything you need, nothing you want. You don't want to see me most of the time, but you do want to say hi to me from
afar,
and standing up.
That's it. I know, but after Phil Med, man, I made an impact there, and it taught me a lot. Really, like I always tell people, even now, like public speaking is not a hard thing for us, right? Because from a young age, especially as a corpsman, I mean, shoot, I had up to 240 dudes. I had to know their last four, their health records, and I had to talk to them as a group, So these were things that as young men, we developed skill sets that now, like for me, like in the civilian world, like I have no problem addressing 200 dudes. Like, yo, check it out. This is the safety brief you guys are getting today, right? And so after Phil Med, I left and went to First Anglico, which is Air Naval Gunfire Liaisons Company. And I got to work with a lot of pretty unique dudes there. And I got to deploy with my brother Junior, right? So interesting story about this kid. So I met him in 2005. I was out in Iraq on a foot patrol. He was a turret gunner on a separate unit on a convoy. And they got hit with an IED. And lo and behold, our paths crossed. Like, he was laying on the ground. The corpsman was kind of like new on it, wasn't too sure what to do. And I'm like, let me check this dude out, man. And ended up medevac the guy. And fast forward to 2009, we ended up at Anglico together, and we deployed to Afghanistan. We're out there for the Marja operation in the Helmand province. And then we went back in 2011, when we were in support of Sangin. Like, we were kind of a blocking position out in Musa Kela while 3-5 was hooking and jabbing out in Sangin. And, a lot of people always ask me what was worse. Was Iraq worse or was Afghanistan worse? And honestly, like, each theater has its own worse, right? Like, I think for me, in Iraq was worse because I dealt with a lot of Marines. Like, that was my primary casualty, was Marines. Fallujah was probably one of the worst ones. Like, there was wounded every day, KIA every other day. I mean, I remember mortarmen were going out as riflemen because they were short on the lines. I remember corpsmen were going down and coming in as, I came in as a replacement for a couple of guys, so that was a tough spot for that aspect of it. Fast forward into Afghanistan, what was rough for me was I dealt with a lot of kids, right? And so I'm not a parent. I got no kids. Like, why should I even care, right? But I got nephews and nieces, brothers that got kids. So yeah, like, that's always a hard one, right? And it's a tough pill to swallow when you have one. And like, you got a mother comes up, hands you a kid that's like lifeless, right? Like, I want you to fix it. It's like, man, I can't do nothing about it, So that one for me was a hard one. When I left, actually, I was still in Afghanistan. I was meritoriously promoted to first class. So now I'm an HM1. I'm an LPO. I got guys out there. And still, I'm taking care of them, running FMF tests, teaching them knowledge. I had a couple of reservists that, the reservists that get activated to come out, as corpsmen aren't really taken care of when they're reservists. Like, there's really not somebody that keeps up with their knowledge, especially their FMF. And so I took the opportunity to develop a program while we're still out there. And because I ran the FMF program when I was still at division as a young second class, it gave me that leeway. And so I had made my reputation, to always push for sailors. It doesn't matter where they come from, but if they're attached to, the FMF, primarily in the division, into the grunts, then they're going to know everything that grunts know, right? So for those of you that don't know, like, the Fleet Marine Force program, when it was established, even to Marines to this day, are like, dude, why do corpsmen have to know this stuff? Like, we don't know this stuff, right? And so, I mean, shoot, I got mine when I was in Okinawa. I mean, I remember Seabird giving me classes like, Bo, you got to know this. And I'm like, I got it. Taking notes, man. So I developed that. And, that was a thing that I got from when I was an instructor, and even when I was at division, I was an instructor for combat trauma management, which was a course that was developed by corpsmen to teach back to the corpsmen that were checking in to division. And so after I came back from Afghanistan, I got a free ticket for a chief selection, and lo and behold, I got selected. So, a lot of people out there know that, the only time I ever got promoted off a test was third class. I was meritoriously the second, meritoriously the first, and I was literally meritoriously to a chief. And, yeah, like when people ask me like, yo, how many times did you take the test? I'm like, never took it, man. So, when people ask, I'm like, look, man, merit does speak volumes. If you go out there and you hustle and you take care of your Marines, you do what you're supposed to, it speaks volumes, and every Marine that's still out there to this day will still, Doc, like, they'll hit me up like, Doc, I got a question about my kid. I'm like, bro, I'm not a pediatric, man. They're like, oh, be my doc, man. He took care of me. And I'm like, all right, man, what's up, man? I'm firing away. So I think, that those are things that for us, like, again, growing up, a standard expectation, you take the knowledge that you're always learning and you develop yourself, So after making chief, I was out in a unit called Assault Cracks Unit 5 out in Camp Pendleton. I got to work on the blue side of the Navy, like not the blue side of a hospital, but I got to meet all sorts of rates in the Navy, machinist mates, bosun mates, gas turbine system engineers, sonar tech. So I learned a different culture, so to say. Even though I'm part of the Navy, I wasn't part of that Navy because I was always assigned to Marine. So it really opened up my eyes and gave me a difference in understanding different mindsets of people, right? So I know the warrior mentality, right? Because grunts, division, that's all you know. And now I go into sailors that push buttons all day and never see combat, right? So like I met a sailor once there. He's like, man, Chief, he goes, I've never met anybody with an award that has a valor on it. I'm like, bro, there's a ton of dudes over here at Pendleton, bro. Like, come over here, let me show you, So, at that point, making chief is one of those pinnacle moments for us, especially as corpsmen, because, I mean, we're out there. There's a lot of us, and they don't make many of us, But when they do make us, we have the due diligence and the responsibility of ensuring that we carry the tradition of teaching sailors to include our junior officers. And we do a lot of mentoring, right? So after I left ACU 5, I went back to division, and the goal for any sailor that grows up in division is like, yeah, man, I want to come back here and be a chief. I mean, at least that was what my goal was, right? That I wanted to go back and have my own battalion. And yeah, lo and behold, I did. I ended up at 1st Battalion, 4th Marines out in 1st Marine Division or 1st Marine Regiment. And, my sailors that I had, like a lot of them now are either Master Chiefs, they're Chiefs, IDCs, and to this day, I'm like, yo, Chief, like, I need some advice. I'm like, yo, man, I'm out, bro. Like, you got the helm now. I'm like, nah, but this is like, yeah, but you still give it. I still give it, bro. I'm not gonna die, man, because they're like, nah, man, this needs like a chief boat tweak on there, right? They're like, well, I got you, man. So, there's things out there that, like, I always tell sailors, and it's like, look, man, like, if you got dreams and drive to do what you want, then fucking do it. The only obstacle that's always in your way is you, and if you don't get out there to do it, then you'll never know. And so after having 1-4 and we took them out on the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, I had a lot of guys out there that, stayed in, re-enlisted, they wanted to continue their careers, and lo and behold, they're chiefs now out there. So after I left 1-4, I ended up being the senior enlisted leader at 5th Marine Regiment, which was really cool because that was probably the most sailors I had in Impact. I had 215 sailors, and we were responsible for the healthcare of 5,000 Marines. And I remember when I got there, like, I had about 21 legal case sailors, right? And so I was like, well, what's wrong with these guys? They're like, oh, they're on legal hold. I'm like, well, what does that mean? They're like, oh, but they can't go to the field. I'm like, bullshit. If they're sitting around here fucking taking all this AC, hell, they got time to go to the field. So people started realizing that, if you went on legal hold, you can get out of field ops and crap, right? Well, Chief Bo steps in and is like, hell no, Chief Bo's going to put you to work. What's your legal case? Oh, in 2 weeks? Cool, bro. You got 2 weeks of field time. Let's go. And so, it became to the point where, like, hey, man, like, you better do your job, bro, or Chief Bo's going to hold you accountable. Because why? Because I was held accountable when I was an HA, an HN, a third class. I mean, shit, even when Hector Reyes checked in, he was a third class, I was mad because I was like, damn, this motherfucker took my job, right? And now he's a senior line corpsman. I'm like, crap. you know, but he held me accountable too, you know, and so, you know, those were I'm paying it forward now because now I'm in that leadership position and teaching it to the junior guys, right? And so I probably ended up having one of the best regiments in division. A lot of sailors were always getting meritorially promoted there, you know, and that was one of my biggest things. It's like, some of us ain't book smart, man. I mean, shit, I was ESL, you know, and I had to learn hard, but I learned that, you know, putting in the effort and having fucking resilience goes the distance. At the same time, having the standard and expectations and accountability of yourself. And so a lot of my guys are just performing, right? Outperforming other guys, right? And so I had a kid one time and he was like, Chief, I'm never going to get promoted. And I'm like, well, who knows you? He goes, well, everybody knows me. I'm like, I called the other side of the base. I'm like, hey, man, you guys know this HM2 something. Like, what the hell is that guy? I'm like, man, how many, you know, PON docs have you attended and have taught? And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, man, you're a second class. Why aren't you teaching these young guys how to get promoted? And he's like, oh, light bulb, right? So now he's like part of associations, helping coordinate test exams and whatnot. Lo and behold, he just made a chief last year and he hits me up and he goes, hey, remember that one time? I'm like, oh, well, you want to try to tell me everybody knows you, but nobody knows you? He's like, yeah. He goes, everybody knows me now. I'm like, well, that's good, man. I'm happy for you, right? But, you know, these are things that I feel like I look back to when I was a yellow sailor, right? If I never had the right mentors, even bad leaders, like everybody's had a bad leader before. Like we had a bunch of bad leaders back in the day, you know? But even they taught me something, right? They taught me how not to be. And so I took those life lessons and I paid it forward. So when I was the chief and I took care of my dudes, they all saw it. Like I went to the field when they were out in the field and it was raining, and I'd bring them out hot wets because that's always a nice thing, right? A little hot wet out there. That's good, you know? So a lot of even the Marines were like, damn, Chief, like you're different. I'm like, I just grew up in division, man, taking care of sailors and Marines. So when I left Camp Pendleton, I finished my career out in Hawaii, and, you know, that was like the start of my decompress, right? Because now I'm in Hawaii, but, you know, I was hanging out at Camp Smith, so I got a general up there, got my you know, dot my I's and cross my T's. But when I retired, I had my ceremony at 5th Marines, right? And I thought, for me, it was a pretty, like, nostalgic, right? I checked in as an HA, and I, you know, held up my cover as a chief at 5th Marines. And so when I got out, you know, just kind of trying to find a new routine, man. And it was like one of those where I was like, man, kind of just shuffling through life, right? Ended up in California for a bit, Arizona, here in Nevada. I lived out in Utah for a while. And then finally, you know what? I said, all right, I'm going to go back home. So my goal was always to go back home. I had to prove to myself that I could make it back home. Because when I left, you know, I was at a crossroad where, you know, trying to go to school, trying to be a thug out in the streets, and, you know, just wasn't matching. It wasn't vibing for me, you know. And so I figured I'm going to go back home, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to go back into when I left. I'm going to go back and be something different, you know. So bought a house by the lake. I found my peace, found my new routine. And then for a while, I did contracts. And yeah, you know, along the way, I've met a lot of cool people. And what I noticed, though, is that there's a lot of vets out there, right? So one of the things I do now is I help veterans with their disability claims. A lot of them don't know how to process it, where to start, or have started it and just can't finish it. Because I feel that the way the system's designed is, you know, you go on there and you put a claim like, hey, my foot hurts, right? And so somebody reads it, it's like, oh man, this guy just has foot pain, like no big deal. But I think that when you write and articulate your pain in a manner how we as corpsmen would write notes, now you're presenting it to a doctor who's actually reading this stuff, right? So I try to take guys' claims and just kind of rewrite their stuff for them, right? Instead of just saying, hey, I got foot pain because I fell in the infiltration course, I write it out for them where it's like, look, man, you need to describe that pain like it's, you know, shooting pain or it's numbing pain, and it's numb because you rolled your ankles, you're running the obstacle course or the infiltration course, and then you were doing a workup for your deployment, and guess what? You just sucked it up because that's what we did back in the day, right? So now you're it's like saying you do the S of the SOAP note, right? And so the S of the SOAP note for us as corpsmen was the subjective part. you give as much detail as possible to describe that pain or that chief complaint, right? So for us, when we're doing sick call, your patient showed up, and that subjective part is what the doc would look at, right? Get as much information possible. So when he does his objective portion of it and would do the assessment of it, he has the backing of what to prescribe for the plan of how to treat this chief complaint, you know? So for a lot of vets that I come across is what I tend to try to help them with, right? You know, and a lot of these guys that I meet, I mean, it's not at no building where I'm sitting behind a desk and I'm in a shirt and tie with my lovely wall in the back. You know, it's just meet these guys at, you know, Lowe's, at the bar, sometimes out in the grocery store, just chopping it up, or, you know, just run into somebody like, hey man, I hear you help people. I'm like, absolutely. You know,
That's right. That's right. Hey, and I'm gonna end up talking to Bo a lot more because we're gonna talk to him and Junior. He brought up Junior. Junior started this nonprofit called American Bloodline. We're gonna end up going into that a lot and a whole bunch of other things with Bo. Hope to get you on with that. We're gonna get you on with the Lima Company guys. You know, Bo brought up all those guys. You know, Hudnall, Reyes, and Otis Miller, all those guys. So, you know, we're going to get all those guys in. But, hey, there's a huge thing that Bo brought up. You know, he brought up how, in fact, the standard of trust that has to happen within the Marine Corps for us as corpsmen to be meeting that standard. We're one of the most decorated elements within the military as the hospital corps. And so we have to meet this standard and we have to meet this trust with our Marines in order for them to be able to say, hey, Doc, you're going to come with us and we're going to trust you 100% on the line to fight the fight. And we're going to get through this together. And so, hey, you know, Bo went over a lot. He kind of skipped over a lot of cool shit and hard stuff. There's a lot of hard stuff in between. So, you know, if you want to get some of that knowledge, if you want to talk to him, feel free. Bo, if they want to get a hold of you, talk about that real quick. How can they get a hold of you? They can do it through me. But if you want to give out any information, feel free to do that right now. Any last words for you, brother?
So I'm not a social media person. I don't like people trolling me. However,
you can troll him through me.
You can, but if you do want to get a hold of me, get a hold of Siebert. He has my number.
But hey, until next time, strength and honor. Out.
The only way, and we need nothing more. The only way, together forever, that's for sure.